Hey guys, Guy in a Wheelchair here, and I'm back for Deception of Religion number 25. I'd like to thank Miss Guy in a Wheelchair, who's currently manning the camera. Also, I want to let you guys know that I'm going to start a Patreon. I'll have it linked in the description below. If you click the link, you'll see that there's no perks listed there. I want your suggestions about perks that you would like. Honestly, you probably think it's because I want fan involvement, but no, it's only because I couldn't think of anything. So just go ahead and send me your suggestions and we'll see what we can come up with. If you want to donate, great. I thank you in advance. If you don't, great. No obligation. If you have a problem with it, fuck off. Now, on to Deception of Religion number 25. Today we're responding to someone that we've responded to in the past, a Mr. State of Daniel. And he's going to explain to us why all the bad things that happen in the world are not God's fault. Let's go.
Hey YouTube, I hope that all is going well. So when my brother and I were younger, we had this friend named John, and for a time he was our best friend. We did everything together. We'd play in the treehouse that all the neighborhood kids helped build, we made Lego movies, we had sleepovers, all that fun stuff. On more than one occasion, my brother and I asked John to come with us to church, to VBS, to youth group, and he always resisted. And so one time I flat out asked him, "Hey man, what's up? Why don't you want to come?" And I will never forget that really sad look in his eyes as he formulated his answer. He explained that his parents were in the middle of a divorce, and he asked, if God is so good, why is my life so bad? This was the first time I had ever been confronted about the problem of evil. We were only 12 or 13 years old at the time, but I think that a lot of people in every age group wrestle with this. How can an all-knowing, all-loving God allow suffering? If God is so good, why is the world so bad? If God knows everything, why does he allow evil to happen? I think the reason the problem of evil is so universal is because we all feel it, we experience it.
You think the problem of evil is universal because it affects everyone? Well, I agree. And also, I'd just like to take a minute to thank you for supplying us with the dictionary definition of universal. Isn't that what universal means? It affects everyone?
From my personal experience, there are 3 steps to handling the problem of evil. Number 1, we have to remember that evil isn't a thing. I used to envision evil as darkness or this brooding spiritual entity, but the reality is that these mental images are a little misleading. You see, God created everything, and everything God created is good. If we view evil as a thing, then we naturally blame God for its existence. Instead, we need to remember that evil isn't a thing, it's a wrong choice. It's the consequences of a wrong choice. It's only when the world chooses sin and selfishness that evil is allowed to manifest.
Oh, Mr. State of Daniel, what a silly fucker you are. Do you realize with that last statement, you just disproved the entire creation story? If you don't, allow me to break it down for you. See, what you did was negate any wrongdoing by God in evil by saying that evil was the consequence of a bad choice and not created. However, good is the exact polar opposite of evil, so by that same logic, good is the consequence of a positive action, not something created by God, thus negating the need for God entirely.
Now, there are going to be some people out there who say, if God is the origin of free will, and free will creates room for sin, then can't we blame God for evil? No. Think of it this way, you wouldn't blame parents for the choices of their children, even though they're the origin of their children, right?
Yeah. I mean, you could at least partially blame a person's bad decision making on a negative outlook and perspective instilled in them by bad parents. Why is that not valid?
Yes, God is the origin of free will, but it's the people who make evil choices that deserve the blame. Number 2, not all suffering is bad, and God actually uses suffering for good. Think of the story of Joseph and the coat of many colors. His brothers threw him into a pit and sold him into slavery. He was brought into a foreign land, pleaded to God for help, but he was still forced into bondage and misery. No one would have blamed Joseph had he abandoned his faith or blamed God for his suffering, But instead he allowed these trials to refine his character, and his masters noticed, and because of this, Joseph rose to become the Prime Minister of Egypt. As Prime Minister, Joseph would save thousands, including his own family, from starvation. But Joseph would have never become an agent for social change if it weren't for his suffering and if it weren't for his brothers betraying him and throwing him into a pit.
Consider the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Goldilocks is wandering through the woods and comes upon a cabin, and she finds 3 beds and she sleeps in them. She finds 3 bowls of porridge and she eats them. She finds 3 chairs and she sits in them. What? That's not right. Oh, I'm sorry. You were trying to prove your point using a fictional story. I just wanted to contribute to the conversation.
Animals hardly understand anything about us or our nature, so how much more are we unable to understand everything about God's perspective?
Animals understand so little about our perspective the same way we understand so little about God's. Great point. Great point. Except for, when's the last time you cared about 2 animals fucking each other in the ass? So, if we're as low to God as animals are to us, then why does God care where a man puts his pee-pee?
Now, let's say that you accept my first 2 points. God didn't create evil, and perhaps there's some good that comes out of suffering.
No. Let's not say that, Mr. State of Daniel. Because I don't. Not at all. Move on.
Number 3, which is that God suffered too. Atheists and those who wrestle with the problem of evil are actually right. God is not off the hook for the evil and suffering in this world. But we need to take it another step further. God is the hook, and that's why we lay our burdens on the cross.
God didn't suffer. It's a fictional story, and even if he did, I wouldn't lay my burdens on a medieval torture device. Do you realize how fucking sadistic you sound? Do you realize it?
As a Christian, I believe that all things work together for good, and that I can find hope and peace in Jesus Christ. We can never fully understand why God allows evil and suffering to exist in this world, but when we look at the cross, we're reminded that God loved us so much, and that he takes our suffering so seriously that he took it upon himself.
No, Mr. State of Daniel, that's actually not what I think of when I see the cross. When I see the cross, I think of the thousands of Jewish insurgents that were tortured and put to death in medieval times. Because that's what it was, Mr. State of Daniel. A fucking torture device. How does that make you feel? Knowing you and other people who believe what you believe find love and morals from a medieval torture device. Had Jesus never died on it in your little story, it would be thought of the same way as the guillotine. Interestingly enough, had Jesus been decapitated with the guillotine, everybody would walk around wearing guillotines around their neck. Sounds pretty fucked up, doesn't it? So that video accomplished absolutely fucking nothing. I love how Christians can try to twist stories and words and definitions to make God seem blameless for all the bad things that happen in the world. Although, I do agree with him on one thing. I don't think God is responsible for any of that stuff. Because he doesn't fucking exist. But, by your own Christian logic and your book that dictates it, he is. And no matter how many mental or linguistic hoops you jump through, you can't change that. If you think that your Bible says that God is not responsible for all the evil in the world, then your comprehension of the Bible is wrong!